Hi everyone, welcome to this week's History Tour with Holly. Today I'm going to talk about a memoir. It's called Coming Undone, a Memoir by Terri White. Terri White is a well-known figure in the world of fashion journalism. She was a well-known journalist at the Vogue in New York and had a long career in London as well. I'm not really into fashion in general, so I hadn't heard of her before I came across this book. But it was the story of her coming undone in order to find herself. So the story begins with her being admitted to a psychiatric ward. And it's very confronting. She talks about herself waking up from a drunken night and attempted drug overdose, taking herself to the emergency room, and then being admitted to the wards. And the first chapter is all about what it's like, what she's thinking, what she's going through, how she's feeling. And it's very confronting because she describes it in great detail. And I think the thing that I found most confronting was the way she conveyed that intense sense of powerlessness that you feel when other people take control of your life. It sounded like from her perspective that being in the psychiatric ward was like being in a prison. And anyway, and then it's one of those stories that jumps from the past back to the present, and she talks about her mother and then back to her jobs in New York and London, and talks about her mother feeding her alcohol as a teenager and how that began her alcoholism journey, and how she just kept doing it and string of broken relationships. And anyway, it was a portrait of somebody who was intensely lonely, who sunk their sadness in alcohol, in self-harm, in loneliness, and there's some graphic imagery. So if you're going to read this, be warned. If you've ever had issues with self-harm or with alcoholism or with drugs or anything like that, it's very triggering. But it's so honest, and you don't find people willing to speak that honestly about things like that, about addiction and things like that. Like it's very powerful how honest she is. And the end doesn't actually have her being better. She goes to hospital, she comes out, she doesn't end up going to AA meetings, she doesn't end up going anywhere else, but she goes home to London and then goes back to New York and then goes home eventually. And that's kind of where the story ends, but it doesn't end in, oh, and I'm all better now and everything's fine. And I quite liked that. It was a bit disappointing, but also when I reflected on it, it was right, because as much as things are better for her after that change, she'll continue to struggle. I guess it made me think about how people with either any mental illness, physical illness, addiction, it is a struggle. It is not it'll be a problem for a little while and then it will go away. It'll get easier and it'll get harder, but it is a struggle that you go through for years, sometimes whole lives. And I guess I just wanted people to think about that. I highly recommend it as a book, but it is, as I say, very confronting. Anyway, I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you like this content, and I'll see you next time.